John Schneider has no shortage of big personnel decisions, including contract extensions to make in coming months. Who should be the top priority heading into Seattle's offseason in 2025? We're going to be breaking it all down here at our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, who is going to be joining us from his new office here for today's show. And a special thanks to all the 12s, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, whether you're tuning in from West Seattle or you are down in Hancock, Texas. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks are going to be heading into the offseason with plenty of big decisions to make. We're going to take a look at the unrestricted free agents set to hit the market, as well as restricted and exclusive rights free agents. We got a Monday mailbag and much more coming your way on this Monday episode, brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Obviously, Rob, we're early in the offseason, but we've already heard plenty of murmurs about the futures of players like Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett in Seattle. All of those players that I just mentioned are entering the final year of their contract, and there are other key players that are in the same situation. There's a number of 2022 draft picks that are also going to be entering the final year of their rookie contract, and the Seahawks will have to decide which of those players they are going to pay to bring back for a second contract as well. So there's plenty of personnel decisions that John Schneider, Mike McDonald, and the rest of the front office are going to have to make, and they're not going to be able to bring everybody back. Looking at the list of players that are entering the final year of their contract, again, this can be veterans, it could be players in the last year of their rookie contract. There's some very notable names here, Rob, that are now entering the negotiation window. This is when the Seahawks tend to get extensions done with players when there's 1 year left in the contract. You've got Geno Smith, Ken Walker III, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant, both young tackles, Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, Boye Mafe, Draymond Jones, Reek Woolen, Kobe Bryant, and even the punter Michael Dixon is going into the last year of his current contract. So I just listed off 12 names, Rob, of players who are going into the final year of their deal, and the Seahawks have to figure out who is going to be a priority to get a new deal done with now, and which of these players they want to play wait and see with, and maybe next year before they actually become a free agent, potentially sign them to a new contract. And it creates a lot of elements in terms of who's going to be prioritized, especially when you're trying to find an offensive coordinator who is going to have a say on some of these players.
Yeah, no question about it. It makes it for a fascinating decision by John Schneider and the staff, as you said, Corbin. And you know, just throwing myself into the ring as far as the way that I would evaluate this. Look, I'm going to prioritize youth. I'm going to prioritize durability. I'm going to prioritize just how good of a player have you proven yourself to be. Are you an all-pro caliber player? Are you a Pro Bowl caliber player? Are you a guy who, you know, frankly, if you were no longer on the Seahawks, would there be much of a difference in terms of the one-loss record? And so I think that when you put that list of names up there, Corbin, that there are going to be some differences of opinion between you and I. There's going to be some differences of opinion between John Schneider, Mike McDonald, the fan base, media, everybody. And I'll just throw out the name that I'm actually going to list here first, which I think is going to shock a lot of people because he's last on your list. And that is the all-pro caliber kicker or punter, and Michael Dixon, who I do believe is one of the absolute best in the NFL at his position. He has absolutely flipped the field, and I would argue flip the rankings in terms of the Seahawks, in terms of wins and losses over his career. Look, I know that he is not going to put the Seahawks into the Super Bowl on his own merits, but still, To me, Michael Dixon is everything that you are looking for. And so that's why he would be the punter of all positions, would be my absolute top priority when it comes to extending current Seahawks players for the long term, because I do believe the Seahawks are a better player with Michael Dixon on the field.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to make. And listen, Michael Dixon's going to be on my list of 5 players. He's going to be number 5 because he's a punter. But that is absolutely a guy that you need to get signed long-term, because punters can be booting the football well into their 30s, maybe even early 40s. Michael Dixon's got a lot of good football left in him, so he's not going to be breaking the bank as a punter. That is a contract that you can get done. As far as looking at the rest of the list, as far as who should be prioritized for extension, there's a couple players on this list, Rob, that I would immediately cross out and say, look, I'm not going down that road, at least right now. The names that I would put in that box, I think Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant. I'm going to surprise some people with this one. Ken Walker III. I am not putting him in that box right now to prioritize to give a new contract. I just gave Noah Fant a 2-year deal last year. The numbers this year were mediocre. So I'm not going to be dishing out more money unless he goes out and has a great season. Then maybe I would consider doing that. Tyler Lockett at his age. May I restructure? Could I come up with some type of a agreement to keep him around? Sure, but I think it's going to be tricky to do that given his diminished production, the fact that he is an aging player. So those 3 players I just mentioned on the offense side of the ball are not going to be top priorities for me. And on defense, Draymond Jones is the player from that group that I would immediately, for the same reasons as Noah Fant, I haven't gotten the production for what I paid for. If I get done with this season, if he's on the roster this year and he gets into the season, had a good year, then maybe we can explore bringing him back on a new contract. But I'm not going to be rushing to make that deal. As far as priorities go, to me, Geno Smith and DK Metcalf have to be at the top of this list. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that would like to see a different quarterback under center for the Seahawks. This does not prevent John Schneider from drafting a quarterback, even as early as the first round. You can re-sign Geno Smith and you can still invest a high draft pick in a quarterback of the future. These things do not have to be exclusive. And if the season starts to go in a position where you feel like it's time to put the young guy in, you can do that. You don't have to split those two things up. And I think DK Metcalf, I don't know that he's going to be pushing for $30+ million per year. I think it might be a very similar contract to the one he's got right now. And I still think there's upside that's untapped with another offensive coordinator. So those 2 players, and then I'm going to maybe surprise some people with this one. Boye Mafe is number 3 on my list. I think Boye Mafe is still scratching the surface of his full potential. He has been really dynamic the last 2 years, and he doesn't just get sacks. He breaks up a lot of passes. He plays with high effort. He's a guy that can play a large volume of snaps. He's improved as a run defender. Again, I think he's still kind of a raw player in some regards. He's become much better than when they first got him, but that is a player I'd be willing to sink an investment in. And then behind those 3, at number 4, this might surprise people too. I'm not putting Reek Woolen. I'm putting Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe Bryant is going to be a long-term safety next to Julian Love in this secondary. Maybe Reek Woolen changes that the way he plays next year, but I don't think he's been consistent enough where right now I can say that is a player that I want to sink a ton of money into, especially with Devin Witherspoon already out there, and he's going to need a new contract in a couple of years.
Yeah, and that, you basically just took the words right out of my mouth, Corbin. I mean, as far as who do you want to sink a ton of money into? Who has the youth? Who has the production? Who has the durability? Who still has that untapped potential? And that's one of the reasons why, as you just mentioned with Boye Mafe, he's number 2 on my list, just because I do see some untapped potential with him. We saw him take a step this past, or 2 years ago, with Pete Carroll. I thought we saw him take a whole other step this past season with Mike McDonald. So I do think that you can make an argument for Boye Mafe, because the players who can affect the quarterback are almost as valuable as the quarterback himself. And again, the Boye Mafe is a relatively young player whose game, I think, translates very well to Mike McDonald's system. So that's why he would be number 2 on my list. Reek Woolen, interestingly enough, is number 3 on my list. And I say interestingly enough because we can all see the flashes of the talent. The fact that he was benched at one point this season, the fact that Mike McDonald himself has basically said, hey, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but basically when he is locked in, he's as good as anybody in the league. But he kind of left the rest for us to kind of question. So what is Rick Willen when he's not locked in? Is he a guy who's going to be riding on your bench? Because it does feel like at times, Corbin, the Seahawks have been willing to invest in upside, and they haven't necessarily gotten much bang for their buck when doing so. And so I have some real qualms about, basically giving a whole bunch of money to a player like Rick Willen when I have some reservations about whether he is one of those very, very unique individuals that when you give him 10, 20 plus million dollars immediately, is he the type of guy who's going to work even harder, or is he going to kind of coast? And that, to me, is one of the biggest questions. I have a similar argument with Charles Cross, left tackle position. I think he's a good player. I don't know that he's ever going to become a great player. And I do think the Seahawks want to become more physical at the point of attack and be able to create a little bit more running space. So I think that in the very similar conversations with Rick Willen, to me, Charles Cross is right there in that conversation. I do mention him here now because this is a terrific offensive line class that is coming up in the 2025 NFL draft. And I do think that is something that the Seahawks may be looking at trying to take advantage of. Cornerback is also pretty good. That leads me finally to my last point here with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. Obviously, that is the whole conversation here. When you look at Geno Smith, the fact that he is going to be 35 years old next year, I just don't know that extending him, at least not for a long-term extension, maybe 1 year, but anything longer than that, I just have some struggles with that. I don't know that Geno Smith is the quarterback with the way that the Seahawks are currently built that is going to get you to a Super Bowl. I don't know that he's better than most of the other cornerbacks in the NFC. And you're going to start talking about 35 to 40 plus million dollars per season. It's a very similar situation with DK Metcalf. I mean, he is due $31.875 million this upcoming season. Obviously, if Seattle wants to bring him back long-term, you want to extend that, drop that salary cap number. But my goodness, if you are going to be dedicating that amount of money to a wide receiver, then he has got to be easily your number one overall wide receiver. I don't know that you can make that argument based on his production, based on his inconsistencies in terms of temperament, in terms of production this past season.
When we come back, we've got our latest offseason Monday mailbag. We're going to dive into your questions and answer as many as we can. Don't go away. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're facing the task of hiring for your small business, you want to make sure to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a site manager for Seahawks on SI, LinkedIn Jobs is my go-to to post writing positions to land the top candidates out there. They've made the process easy and seamless. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have to have that many quality candidates right at your fingertips. So easy, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even launched a feature that helps write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of the final weeks of football season, and that's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving the platform. This week, I picked Matthew Stafford for more than 230 passing yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 1 total touchdown. Making these picks, it's quick, it's simple, and it's so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we will do each and every Monday throughout the offseason, it's time to open up the mailbag, and we've got tons of great questions from you, our valued 12s. Let's get to the first one. And, Rob, this is going to be a topic that's going to come up all throughout the offseason, and it's kind of piggybacking off the conversation last segment. Jossie Kosa 11, who do you want as the next best QB option, either from the draft or free agency, if Geno Smith is not brought back? And this has been the question I've been asking fans for the last 3 weeks. If you want to move on, well, then what's the option to replace him? Rob, I'm curious what your thoughts are, and obviously this can change for you and I as we continue to dive into this draft class, who might be available in free agency, but who is a name or two that jumps out to you right now that you're thinking, if Geno Smith's not under center, this is who could be under center for the Seahawks next year?
Well, you take away $40 million from Seattle salary cap this upcoming season with Geno Smith. You slide that over to Sam Darnold, should he be available. I think that would be one candidate you could at least have a conversation about. Obviously, there's some opportunities there in the trade market. I think the J.J. McCarthy with the exact same team, the Minnesota Vikings. Should the Vikings go with Sam Darnold? Look, it would take an exceptional offer, I should say, to pull a rookie contract from the Minnesota Vikings. But still, I think that is something that the Seahawks could potentially do if they wanted to. I also think that Daniel Jones, the free agent, again, he's not a guy that's going to get a lot of excitement from Seahawks fans. But frankly, when you signed Geno Smith all those years ago, that didn't elicit a lot of excitement as well. I think it's going to be a critical decision what Seahawks do at offensive coordinator. The fact that Mike Macdonald was as lukewarm as he was with Geno Smith, when he was asked, Geno Smith going to be your starter next season, that to me is, again, one of the reasons why I do think that Seattle is going to be exploring some opportunities here. Look, and when it comes to the NFL draft, of course, one of the things that I like to cover here, Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in this draft class. I am not in love with him. I love the 2026 draft class. So maybe I'm just the old man who is looking long-term down the road, Corbin, but at least from my perspective, struggling through a 3-12, 3-14, whatever you want to say, it's now 17-game season, struggling through an ugly year next year, I think would be worth it to get yourself in position to say, draft one of the quarterbacks that I think is going to be much, much better in 2026, 2027 than just competing to try to sniff the playoffs the way the Seahawks have the last couple of years with Geno Smith at the helm.
And a lot of people are not going to like that response, but there may be some fans that are completely on board. Like, maybe we do need to take a step back to go get that quarterback. And from my opinion, that if you're wanting an elite guy at the top, somebody that is, not a can't miss, but somebody that's got a really good chance to be a franchise QB, I just don't know that you're going to have a chance to do that this year. And I don't like the free agent options either. Next question here coming from Tweets Are Dumb. I would agree with that. Not exactly Seahawks related, but best guess where Russell Wilson plays next year and how much will he make? So I will give one answer where he's not going to be. He will not be back in a Seahawks uniform. And I know there have been some fans that have been pitching that idea. That is not going to happen. But I'm going to throw a team out there. They interviewed Pete Carroll today. How about a Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson reunion in Vegas? Yeah. That is the wild card to me. I could see Wilson back in Pittsburgh too, potentially. But the Raiders, and look, the Broncos are still going to be paying him some money. So I don't think the Raiders will have to break the bank to do this. Bring in an established QB. He gets 2 revenge games against the Denver Broncos on the docket. That is my wild card to sign Russell Wilson. It is not the Seattle Seahawks, though. He is not coming back to the Pacific Northwest. Our next question from Was Ein Humberg. How can it be that a trade in early 2015 still has the biggest impact on the team today? Some of our listeners might be laughing, but I actually was thinking about the Max Unger, Jimmy Graham trade last week. It's just one that just perpetually lingers over time.
Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, Seattle's struggles in the interior of the offensive line has been an issue. It feels like even longer than 2015. And I think that it really was one of the signs that John Schneider, and look, you can criticize him if you want. I remember being excited when the news broke that the Seahawks traded Max Unger for Jimmy Graham, because I just thought, okay, now you have a general manager who is willing to swing for the fences. And so, look, obviously it did not work out the way that the Seahawks wanted. But to me, if you want to win a Super Bowl, like actual rings, not just talk about it, then you've got to have players that are basically difference makers. Jimmy Graham was that. Unfortunately, he wasn't the physical, kind of a people mover along the line of scrimmage that would have fit into the offense. And so I do certainly have some reservations about the move that Seattle made. But still, the point is, I really do think that was a trade that suggested that the Seahawks have a general manager who was willing to go for it. And so, again, to me, this is a trade that I think a lot of Seahawks fans are going to look back and, kind of be sorry about. I think that this is the reason why you have a new head coach, Mike McDonald, that looks like this is a team that is on the rise, because you have the vision from the front office and, frankly, from the ownership, even above John Schneider.
Next question here that is coming from Nick Canto Chris. Best day 2 QB prospect Seahawks could take in the 2025 NFL draft. So Rob may be in a different window than what I am. I am still very much in the early stages of digging into film on all these guys. Now, I watched a lot more college football this year than I have in previous seasons. So I feel like I am well ahead of schedule here, and I've watched a ton of tape on these quarterback prospects. I'm going to throw out 3 names that after the first round could make some sense for the Seattle Seahawks, in my opinion. This can change. I've still got film to go through. But Kyle McCord from Syracuse would be the first name that I have, because the highs, he might have the best throws on film of any quarterback in this entire draft class. When he is winging it, you watch the bowl game. I know Washington State was undermanned, but still, the dude's got a quick release. The ball flies out of his hand. He can make all the throws. The decision-making is the big question mark, and that's why he's probably not going to go earlier than second or third round. Might even be an early day 3 guy. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss has the athleticism that you're looking for, that you can mix in the run game with him. I don't see quite the arm talent from him, though, that I see from Kyle McCord, at least consistently. He played amazing in his bowl game. There's inconsistency there, but I see enough traits to think maybe there could be a starting quarterback there in time. Neither of these guys are going to be playing early, and I know he's had another knee injury. He's having surgery. Curtis Rourke on early day 3 is still a guy that I would take a flyer on, because that guy led Indiana to the college football playoff playing with a torn ACL. Like, that's got to be a major check mark in the plus side for you as a coach. Like, I want that guy in my huddle, and he can make all the throws. He's extremely accurate. When he had pass protection last year, he was as lethal as any quarterback in the country. So that is still a name. I don't think he's going till middle of day 3 now with the ACL news. But this is a guy that I very much would be more than happy to take a flyer on, that I think could still be a starter in the National Football League if he gets with the right team and the right offense. Rob, your next question here from Kyle Frame. Is DK's hot-headedness a liability the Seahawks should consider parting from? Was he being misused this season? So it's really a DK question that kind of goes back to the contract as well.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I think that, yes, he is a hothead who absolutely distracted and detracted from the Seahawks' success on offense this past season. I think that the fact that, just the massive contract that he is due. I mean, he's due $31.875 million this upcoming season. And just so those of you who are throwing out this idea that he would just be cut or something like that, he's got $21 million in dead cap space. So the Seahawks would have to create some type of a trade scenario in which they would get another team to take on that financial capabilities. And I talked about, I think that is a possibility, just because, again, this is not a terrific wide receiver class. And so I do think if Seattle was going to just kind of go scorched earth policy, so to speak, then I think trading DK Metcalf could be a possible scenario. That said, it's so unethical, or the antithesis of what I think that smart general managers and talent evaluators do. When you draft yourself a young, talented player, number 64 overall, of course, that's where the Seahawks drafted DK Metcalf years ago, then you want to keep that guy on your team. And so I don't think it's likely that Seattle trades DK Metcalf. I do think that, again, when you have one of the most physically gifted players in all of the NFL, you want to keep them in Seattle. But at the same time, because the contract is what it is, because the behavior and frankly, the production, the style of play is what it is, I think that is a scenario in which the Seahawks fans had better get used to, because I think there's going to be an awful lot of talk about DK Metcalf getting traded elsewhere. And I do think that Seattle, if they are going to prioritize the run as much as I think that they are going to do in this next version of the offense, then DK Metcalf is a tradable commodity.
Last question here coming from Kay Blossengame. Which one would be better, bringing back Schotty or hiring Clint Kubiak? This is a heck of a question because, in my opinion, these two guys should be at the top of the list for the Seattle Seahawks. And I don't know if Brian Schottenheimer is going to get interviewed for this job 4 years after being fired. Now, you have a different head coach. Pete Carroll's not there anymore, and Russell Wilson's not there anymore. Geno Smith played for 2 years for Brian Schottenheimer. So I'm not going to rule it out. I would not be surprised if there's a report that comes out that Schottenheimer and the Seahawks are going to meet up and they're going to have an interview. But I am more intrigued by Clint Kubiak because of his ties to Kyle Shanahan's style offense. I loved what he did with the New Orleans Saints before pretty much their entire offense ended up on the injury list about 3 games into the season, and he was just trying to play with third and fourth stringers. And I think the fact that he had the ninth most touchdown passes out of Kirk Cousins in 2021, and that Vikings team was not near as good as the one that made the playoffs this year. Clint Kubiak's done some good things as an offensive coordinator, and he's still only 37 years old. It feels like he's been in the league for 40 years, but he's 37 years old. And so I think he and Mike McDonald are cut from the same cloth. I would like both these hires because I think Brian Schottenheimer is a very underrated play caller, and I thought he got a raw deal when he was ousted from Seattle to begin with. But Clint Kubiak would be the one that I'd be leaning towards because of that Shanahan connection. And I'm really intrigued by the things I've seen when he's actually had healthy players that he's been able to run his offense with. When we come back, we are going to shift gears to Seattle's own free agents. Our first look at unrestricted, restricted, and exclusive right free agents who will be hitting the market in mid-March. We'll get to that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. If you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Sam Darnold throwing multiple touchdowns against the Rams or Cooper Kupp being the first player in the game with a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be teaming up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. As always, thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We've talked already a little bit to this point about some potential players that coming from other teams could be free agent targets for the Seahawks, but Seattle has a list of its own free agents that it will be looking to bring back. And so it's time to pull back the curtain, Rob, and take a first look at who's going to be an unrestricted free agent, who's going to be a restricted free agent, and exclusive rights free agents. And just breaking these down real quick as a rehasher for our listeners. Unrestricted free agents, when the new league year starts, they are free to sign with anybody, and the Seahawks do not have the ability to match those deals, so to speak. Once they've signed the dotted line, there isn't going to be a match. They go to the other team. Restricted free agents, you have the ability to match offers from other teams. And if you lose that player, you get draft compensation back if they were drafted previously. Undrafted players, you do not get a pick back in return. And last but not least, exclusive rights free agents. Other teams can't put offers on them. It basically just boils down to, do the Seahawks want to bring them back? And it's a veteran minimum caliber deal. You bring it back on a tender and they play for you the next season. If you don't pick up the tender, then they become unrestricted free agents. Without further ado, Rob, let's get to the list. And obviously, there's a couple huge names at the top here. Ernest Jones being the biggest name for the Seahawks. They want to get that deal done. And I think Jarran Reed is an incredibly important player to prioritize in this process. Maybe Jonathan Hankins at the nose tackle position, but if you really look at this list, at least from the unrestricted free agent standpoint, I think you can make a case that there's really only 2-3 players at the most that you're like, I got to have that guy back next year. There's a lot of players on there who, unless you are re-signing them for veteran minimum to compete for a roster spot, that I don't see any need to throw extra money at them coming back from a team that missed the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Corbin, frankly, I don't know if there's anybody on this, including Ernest Jones. And I know that is going to absolutely, I apologize. There's going to be some people who are driving off the side of the road when I just said that. Look, Ernest Jones has been a spectacular player. Obviously, the fact that Seattle traded for him midseason, he is going to be their top priority. We've all heard the news that Seattle is on and off again with their renegotiations to bring Ernest Jones back to the Seahawks long term. And I really do believe that Ernest Jones is one of the elite inside linebackers in all of the NFL. He's a terrific fit in Mike Macdonald's defense. Everything that we've read and heard and seen of him as a leader of men, all the reasons why to bring him back. And I'll give you the one that concerns me about him. And it's the fact that he is as slim-shouldered as he is. There's not a lot of inside linebackers who are built the way that Ernest Jones is. So I do have some reservations about the fact that even when he was first brought to Seattle, he looked like friggin' RoboCop out there. I mean, he is just has all this, extra shoulder pads, extra knee pads, and things like that. That would be the only reason why I would argue that Ernest Jones, you got to be careful. Don't want to dedicate too many millions of dollars to an inside linebacker, similar to running backs. Inside linebackers are the position on defense that has the most attrition due to injuries. That said, again, Ernest Jones to me is easily the top candidate here of Seattle's pending unrestricted free agents. And I appreciate you kind of going through that list, Corbin, as far as differentiating the different types of free agents. When it comes to the other unrestricted free agents, I think that there's a couple of guys who are a little bit longer in the tooth, but I think there are also very proven players on the field and in the locker room. To me, that would be Jay Reed. That would be Artie Burns. That would be even Laken Tomlinson. Look, I know that he struggled throughout much of the season, but until the Seahawks have a better candidate at the left guard position, then just the fact that, I go back to the very first game of the season, Corbin, when Laken Tomlinson showed up basically, and, he looked like he was wearing kind of the cowboy, I can't even remember what the heck he was wearing. I mean, it was basically like a uniform that was just his own personal style, as far as like he had the chaps, he had the, a vest on. He was ready to go up against the Broncos, just like kind of wearing the cowboy uniform. I like that tenacity, that nastiness that he said that he was going to play with, indicated that he was going to play with, didn't always play with that. So again, to me, we're talking about minimum wage for veteran kind of status here. But I think those are the players that you have to prioritize, and some locker room guys, because I do think that Seattle sometimes has been a little bit more willing to let some of those veterans go and seeing those players excel elsewhere. Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner being some of the players that I would mention.
As far as the unrestricted free agents go, to me, it would be Ernest Jones, Jaron Reed, and then I would have Artie Burns third. Because Artie Burns, you've already been able to re-sign at veteran minimum the last couple of years. There's not going to be teams racing to pay him more money than that. He likes the system. Mike Macdonald likes him. He's just had injury issues. When he's been healthy, though, he had 3 pass breakups in 2 games this year. I mean, he plays well when he gets his chances. He's added slot corner to his repertoire. He can play in the special teams avenue as well. So aside from that, Trey Brown was injured, didn't play well this year. I'm probably moving on that front. Stone Forsythe, we've seen what he is. I've got Mike Jarrell, who I already think has more upside. I'm going to move on that front. Travis Gibson was a healthy scratch for most of the time after they traded for him. He's not going to be coming back. Most of the players on that list, I'm not rushing to even re-sign them at a vet minimum deal. To me, there's a handful of guys maybe that you can make that justification for. As far as the restricted free agents, this year, the tender is going to be a little over $3 million for the non-first and non-second round tender, just the regular round tender. But Josh Jobe was a undrafted free agent signing for the Eagles. So he was not drafted. You're not going to have to worry about that original pick tender. It's going to be the lowest value. And with the way he played this past year, I'm more than happy to pay a little over $3 million and have him be my starter across from Reek Woolen and alongside Devin Witherspoon. If we are going off of all the types of free agents, I would have him number 2 behind Ernest Jones, and then Jaron Reed would be number 3. If they re-signed those 3 players and nobody else on this list, at least from the restricted and unrestricted free agents, the exclusive rights guys are cheap. No big deal there if you bring guys like Brady Russell back. But if they only signed those 3 players I mentioned, Jones, Job, and Reed, that is a successful return to me because I just don't see any major value with the other players on that list.
No, I 100% agree with you. I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth there. I mean, again, I just don't see that there's an awful lot of value as far as some of the restricted free agents that the Seattle has. I mean, there's guys like Jake Bobo or George Halani that are interesting, but at the same time, not anybody that your heart would be broken if they wound up going elsewhere. And so, again, there's no question about Ernest Jones, top priority. As you just said, Josh Jobe to me would be the second priority but the fact that he is a restricted free agent, Seattle has a lot of leeway there. But to me, those are the guys. And then Jay Reed, just because to me, the way that he plays and just the fact that he continues to be productive, he continues to be a leader in the locker room. Those are the priorities. Everybody else basically are, and I hate to say just a guy, but it does feel like this is the opportunity for Mike McDonald to make this a little bit more of his team. So I'm fascinated to see what decisions the Seattle are going to make when it comes to the free agents.
And we're going to be talking about these players a lot more leading up to March 12th, which is the first official day of free agency. That'll be here before you know it. So there's going to be plenty more discussion. We'll have lengthy discussions on all of these free agents. But as you and I have discussed here, this does not look like a group. There have been free agent classes for the Seahawks in the past where there were like 10 players like, man, do you really want to bring them back? This is not one of those groups. And I think that is a good thing because you can really turn the roster over and improve the roster. And they have kind of a tight salary cap as it is. They can open up room pretty easy, but not having a bunch of your own free agents that you need to dedicate money to is going to help with that situation. And you could turn the roster over, hopefully, with superior players in free agency and in the draft. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks wherever you listen to your podcast, whether it's YouTube, it's Apple, wherever you listen, to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to be diving into another key offseason topic, some potential wild card moves that could be made by John Schneider and the Seahawks. We'll get to that tomorrow's show. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Go Hawks.